and recovery is recognized as valuable to all our communities. And the message is to seek to continue to build a recovery-informed society where recovery becomes a societal norm, yes, and prevention and prevent a societal given. Prevention is a societal given. Like, we should just take it as a given that people are going to get better, it's going to get addressed. And I, just to personalize it a little bit, although I had my own addiction many, many years ago in the early 70s, and through the grace of God, I got better. And I went through it again with my son, my middle child, and I'm from Woburn, and before I came here today, I called him up, and he's in Russia. And I said, wow, Dan, I'm going on TV today. Can I mention your name in recovery? Because people from Woburn are going to hear me talking about you, so I won't if you don't want me to. And he said, no, absolutely. He said,
that's great. That's great.
He said, I am so, happy. I am so, he's such a God person that he got better.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
So he said to mention it, but we went through a lot. I mean, I talked about insurance companies because we struggled. And we had, my husband works for a town, and not this town, but a town, and they kept switching insurances. So we'd go from one HMO to another, and oh my gosh, it was, I was the advocate. I mean, just being a nurse, I knew the ropes to take, and not all of them, and I was still a parent, and my husband just kept saying to me, it's got to run its course. It got to run its course. And then I'm thinking, well, what if the end of the course is he dies? That's all I could think of because he was so sick for so long. And, he did get better, and I'll end with that. He's been in recovery for over 10 years.
That's fabulous.
You reminded me of a couple of things. One, to follow on the insurance. There's the formal channels that Mary Ann described. And then, as a parent, I'll say there's also what I call the nutty parent department in these insurance companies that, I don't know, sometimes I was just so frustrated and so scared for my son. And I just, I don't know, you just become possessed. But I would just call up as high as I could possibly go to the president or CEO's office, and I would demand to speak to someone. And I would absolutely refuse to sign these ridiculous bills that, they basically want an explanation, or they want you to, everything is a little trap, in my mind, was to get you to acknowledge that this is the final payment. I would just resubmit. I'd find out that the bills would just eventually, they'd get lower. Why can't they pay what they were supposed to pay the first time? And because some of the benefits might come out of a treatment for addiction, out of one pocket. Some of the other bills and payments, depending on how you're diagnosed, might come out of a dual diagnosis mental health component portion. Now, how is the average mom or dad, or if they don't have a mom or dad or some family member to help them, how is a young person, standalone, going to try to navigate that system when they're under the influence of these drugs? It's impossible.
I know.
It's a full-time job. So, like I said, I got to the point, probably a lot like you were early on. I tried to help as best I could by sharing my story without divulging too much about my kids, because it's their story.
Yeah, it is their story,
and I really needed to tell mine. But in the beginning, I just saw so many kids that I knew were struggling. And I was scared to death that like you said, one of them, would die. By the time my son was 18, my youngest, he was 18 years old, and we were on a break from his treatment program for lunch one day. I said, how many kids do you know that have died? I don't know what even made me ask him. And he went just like this, boom, 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 boom. He named 10 kids by the time he was 18. I'm 50-something. I know I look like 30-something, but
especially on TV. Yes.
I don't know. I can't think of. I have to think really hard to think of one or two people I know that have passed away. And it's just it's so scary. And my youngest son went away to a recovery high school out of state because he just couldn't, function back here. It was not a good environment
Yeah.
for him.
And I think that happens a lot.
It happens
It's
a
not
lot.
unusual.
It happens a lot. And, he was away. He had some very good clean time for, quite a number of months. I don't know if it was, a full year or not, but I don't know the exact timeline because I blurred these stories so many times. I apologize. But, I remember him, coming home and literally relapsing that day. I just learned this the other day, another little piece of the puzzle that, you keep learning, and this happened, years ago. But anyway, he went back out of state, to attend, a recovery high school because there were no such resource like that at the time here in Massachusetts. He was 17 and a half. He went away to treatment when he was 16 and a half. 17 and a half, he was living in a sober house 1,500 miles away, attending a school. And I was torn. My wife and I were torn. We wanted him home, but we knew no good could come of him being here, and there wasn't all the resources that they could offer him there at the time.
And
he was a teenager.
Yeah.
So he lived in a combination of sober houses and with another family. And again, that was a very, very long road, to recovery. The end for him was that he actually came back home, and by then we were done with this. I'm like,
Did you go to 12-step programs yourself, like Al-Anon and Nar-Anon?
I have attended a few. My first experience. Well, I'll finish that story before I lose my train of thought. I said, we're done, paying, treatment. What are you, what are you going to do? And so it was really, up to him at that point.
Yeah.
And he did decide, thank goodness, to go to a program, in southern New Hampshire for about 4 or 5 weeks. And then he went on to a sober house in Maine and came back to the recovery high school in Massachusetts, which we had by then.
Yeah.
And your story about asking your son permission reminded me of a story that when I was asked by Greg Hughes, who was on staff to Lieutenant Governor Healy a number of years ago, and he was very much responsible for coordinating and implementing the substance abuse plan, here in the state of Massachusetts, and great guy. And he invited me to the news conference to announce the new school. So I called my son, same thing, and I said, Jared, I have an opportunity to go. They said I could say something if I'd like to. I don't know if they'll ask me or not, but I don't feel right even mentioning your situation unless you're okay with it. He didn't even hesitate. And he said, absolutely. So when I met with the press, I said, I'll share with you a little bit, if you please include what my son said, because it's not about what I said, it's about what my son said.
Right.
And he said, Dad, something along the lines of, I don't care what people think of me. All I care is that if my story helps one other young person and one other family not go through what I went through and what we've been through as a family, I don't care what you say.
Oh.
And that's
wonderful. That's
great.
brave. It really is brave to do that,
really,
to put yourself out there.
I was really proud of him
Very, you should
for
be.
that, like with your son. It's just great because, that's the thing. Parents, for every one parent, that gets help, or a young, family gets help, or a young person gets help, there's so many that don't. Mary Ann said this statistic about, that you said earlier, that between 2002 and 2005, we lost 78 men and women in the war in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Oh, okay.
Horrible number. Even losing one person
It's
in a war
horrible,
is
right.
terrible. Losing 3,265 to that in that same period. And the vast majority, in those numbers, are believed to be dramatically underreported because often, the hospitals don't report, the exact cause of death, or it's not reported for various reasons. So, I think getting the word out is just a tremendous help.
And
It's so
MOAR
needed.
is certainly a huge way of doing it. It's wonderful. And
Yeah.
what was it? Was it Hillary Clinton that said it takes a village to raise a child? Was it her statement? I forget. But I thought of that oftentimes when Dan was struggling, because he wouldn't listen to me. He wouldn't listen to my husband. He'd listen to everybody else but us. And he finally, he was a senior in high school here when a couple of the teachers embraced him and just said, you know, you can leave at 12 o'clock and go to an AA meeting. One of the teachers here went to an AA meeting at 12 o'clock with him. And the principal, Bob Norton, was so wonderful.
Oh, great.
And Joe Maltasia, he was a teacher here, and he would take him to like the Rotary clubs, and Danny would give his testimony. I mean, that's all part of the healing process.
Sure.
Yes.
And, you know, I am so grateful to those people because
Yes.
I felt like, gee, everybody said, well, you did a good job getting him better. Like, I'm not taking any credit for this. He got himself better and everybody else helped him.
Yeah, you bring up some other good points too. I saw so many parallels with my son.
Yeah.
You know, I know, like I said in the very beginning, I was frustrated because I think this is just a really touchy subject. It's a tough topic for communities, you know, to handle. But more and more are, and there's been a lot of progress in a lot of the communities. You know, the Salem Evening News did a wonderful series of articles a number of years ago. District Attorney John Blodgett of Essex County has been a phenomenal advocate for youth, you know, in family, you
What's
know,
his
around
name?
this. John Blodgett,
Okay.
who's a district attorney in Essex County. He's been wonderfully supportive. And as Marianne mentioned, Senator Tolman, Michael Botticelli, the head of the Bureau of Substance Abuse Services,
Yes.
you know, all of these people that, as a parent before, I thought, oh, that's the White Ivory Towers. They don't care about us. They're busy with other things,
Yeah.
whatever policy things that they do. But boy, do they care. They genuinely do. I mean, I've personally talked to John Blodgett in the past. He'd, you know, it's been a long time, but he'd call me right back. And,
That's wonderful.
you know, certainly Michael and Senator Tolman and a lot of others. But, you know, my son was lucky enough to go back to the Recovery High School. Thank goodness there's a Recovery High School now. And what were the odds on this for me that it happened to be, when they told me where the press conference was for the school, lo and behold, it happened to be in the same middle school building that I attended as a kid, that my wife ran the middle school trips that both my sons attended, and that's the location of all the locations in the state. That's the new location for the Recovery High School.
Oh,
Right.
So,
Wow.
so I've had the pleasure of being able to, you know, meet Michelle Lipinski, who's the principal director there, and her staff. Miracles happen in that school. I mean, I could spend, you know, 2 television shows telling you about that.
Just do that on miracles, because
Yes.
there is recovery and there is hope, and I think
Yeah.
people
Yes.
need to know that.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
You know,
Yes.
for, you know, as many deaths, I'm
Right.
sure there's as many that have
Right.
recovered, and I think that's the theme.
And
Try
the
to
final point I
recover.
wanted to make too was that the school system today in Beverly, we have a new principal, Sean Gallagher, who is just so in tune with the kids. I mean, obviously academics are hugely important, but he gets it. He understands the big picture. You know, the sort of holistic approach to education, if you will, in my humble opinion.
I love it.
Yeah, and Jim Hayes, who I'm really sorry to see him. He's going to be phasing out as superintendent of Beverly, but over the last, you know, as long as the Recovery High School has been there, he has been wonderfully supportive of not putting up roadblocks at all, making it so easy for kids from his city that need treatment and could benefit from that school. He makes it so seamless and easy for them to go.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I wish all communities in
Thank
your
God
listening
for
area
people
would,
like that
would
are
do
passionate
Yeah.
and love the kids, you
Yeah.
know? Doesn't
Yeah.
have to be their own, they just do.
that. Yeah.
I know our community right here in Woburn is really, you know, stand-up community and have tried to help the kids. There's one police officer that I can point out, Beth Higgins, that was instrumental in several kids getting better,
Great.
including my son.
There you go.
But I wanted to, because along with addiction, you know, and all that, and we know that the kids get into trouble.
Yes.
They have no money.
Yes.
So they get into trouble.
Yes.
They steal. They do bad things that they need
Yes.
to be made accountable for. So therefore, you know, they get older and they get better. Let's say, for instance, they face the CORI, that
Right.
awful four-letter word, as far
Yes.
as I'm concerned.
Yes.
So CORI stands for...
Criminal Offender Record Information.
Okay.
When I first heard of it, I thought they were talking about somebody's name. We have to do something about Corey. We have to do something about Corey.
Corey who?
Right?
Yeah.
And then, lo and behold, I got this, you know, rude awakening, and